Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. A record of attendance, Linda has that. Any declarations of conflict of interest? We're missing,
Cliffy said he wasn't going to be here, right?
oh, that's right. Yes, okay, and Darm will be here. Okay, good. Approval of agenda, any additions or deletions? Did I have it, not have additions, Linda?
Your Worship, I have an in-camera item, human resource item.
Okay, thank you. I think mine was 150th? Canada's 150th? Okay, let's do that. Under 9A, Canada 150. Anything else? Okay, motion to approve the agenda with the additions?
So moved with the addition. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Questions been called? All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. Okay. Okay, so the CAO is going to do a presentation on economic indicators. I'll let you take it. And Jeff, just keep in mind that there's people that you'll have to speak right into the microphone.
I will speak right into the microphone.
Okay, good.
Okay, so for those that are new to council, every year before we get into the budget process, I always go through kind of a presentation of indicators, and they're indicators both of economics generally, demographics, and as well as internal financial indicators. And so I go through this for the purpose of kind of setting the stage or the context in which you'll be setting this year's operating and capital budgets. And hopefully it's helpful for you as you work through the budget process. At any time through the presentation, if you have any questions, just sing out, and I'll pause and answer any questions if that's okay. So, I've already addressed that. So, just generally in terms of where we fit within towns in Nova Scotia. So, a couple years ago, there were 30 towns in Nova Scotia. We may be down to 27 or 28 at this point. Generally speaking, our town has 3,491 dwelling units, which is just about double the average town in Nova Scotia. We have 11 square kilometers, where the average town is 9. We have total fiscal operating budget just over 17 million. The average town is just over 7 million. And it talks about property assessment being just about double the average town. In other words, we're bigger than average. In fact, we're the 5th largest among the towns in Nova Scotia. And so that size comes with a lot of infrastructure and responsibilities, and obviously a larger population to serve for services. So this chart may or may not say a lot to you, but let me say that the light blue section, the large section, this is a revenue chart. So this is where we get our revenue. The light blue is taxes. Okay, so the average town gets 78% of their revenue from taxation. Town of Yarmouth gets 71%. And one area where we do particularly better than others is other revenues from owned sources. So through our operations, and our compost facility is a significant part of that. And grants in lieu, we do twice the average in grants in lieu, and a big part of that is the grant in lieu that we receive on the courthouse.
The what?
The grant in lieu of taxes that we receive on the courthouse.
Okay.
Okay, so because provincial and federal properties don't pay property tax, they're exempt. On certain properties, you receive a grant in lieu of the taxes. So we don't get a grant on schools, as an example. There is no grant for universities. Universities, if they have residences, there is a grant in lieu on the residence. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of what you get a grant for and what you don't. But courthouses, going back almost 10 years now, we've received a grant in lieu on the courthouse. And because we have a relatively new and large courthouse, that is a significant amount of money and would affect that chart.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me. And also, as a regional center, keep in mind, we are the only town within an hour's drive any direction, which is kind of a unique situation in Nova Scotia. So where provincial services might be distributed through a few small towns in some regions, in our region they're located within the town primarily, and so that affects our grant in lieu as well. So municipal spending, this is our chart on municipal spending, and there are some differences from the average town. One that I will point out is, where is it here? General government, which is the dark blue, sorry, the light blue. General government services, the average percentage of expenses in towns in Nova Scotia is 16%, and we're at 10%. Let's see, environmental development is an area where a lot of our capital projects and so on are. We're at 13%, the average town's at 4%. So we do spend our money a little differently, proportionally to other towns, and that is, I'll say that is a conscious decision, obviously, of councils year to year. So demographically, in terms of population, this is our population trend, and it's a flat line, and so is the average town. And there really isn't great year-to-year data on this. This primarily relies on census data, and with new data available soon, we'll see what happens there, whether it's up or down. I have different people in different years that are in each year saying it's going to be up and it's going to be down. So I think if a couple of years ago, with as much work as there was out west, I would have said probably down. But just as an indicator, looking at the voter list for the election, it was actually up a little bit from 4 years ago. So it's a hard call in terms of where our population is going to be. Fairly steady overall, though.
I'd like to see us look at that as soon as that information's available.
Yep.
It'd be really neat to see that.
So this is something you may find interesting and certainly related, and this is our population broken down in 5-year age categories. And what I find striking about this, town of Yarmouth is orange and the provincial average is blue. So we're holding our own on the younger demographic between the ages of 0 and say 25. From 25 to about 65, we are lower than the provincial average in towns in every single category in 5-year increments. That is your working age population. And that is something that we're noticing when we hear about employers having difficulty finding people to fill jobs. If you look at the far right of the chart, you'll notice on the senior side that we are well above the provincial average in towns in terms of those demographics. So a lot of seniors, we're holding our own on the young people. But in the working age categories, we're lagging behind, which is an issue. So other demographics, change in population. Obviously, we dropped a little more than the average town, recognizing some towns are closer to the geographic center or larger centers. Median household income, and this one is important, and it'll come up again later in the presentation. Median household income in Yarmouth is below the provincial average for towns. Okay, so that is a concern. Obviously, your household income affects your ability to access services and your ability to prosper.
So again, sorry, this is based on the last census?
This came from provincial, so I'm not sure if they've made some adjustments or projections.
Okay.
Okay. Employment participation, pretty much at the provincial average. Education beyond high school, we're slightly below the provincial average. And again, in terms of income, we know that post-secondary education generally correlates with higher income. There are, our primary industry, lobster fishing, does provide a lot of people in our region with very good incomes. And not necessarily requiring post-secondary education. So there's a bit of an anomaly, I think, if you look at the Argyle numbers, particularly. So internal indicators. This is percentage increase in taxable residential assessment, and it's nice to see the red line jumping up above 0. So we talk about increase in residential tax assessment. As you can see, from 2008 to 2017, fiscal years, we were basically seeing a steady decline in the taxable residential assessment, or at least a slowing of the increase. That's a better way of putting it, a slowing of the growth in residential assessment. The last couple of years, it actually went backwards. This year, it's taken a slight step forward in just over 2% increase in taxable residential assessment. So there are two numbers to pay attention to in residential assessment. One is the taxable assessment, and that is the portion of the market that we are actually able to tax. And then there is the market itself, and the difference is the cap. So if you're familiar with the cap on residential assessments, the program is provincial, and basically if your assessment increases by more than the cost of living, you only pay taxes on that cost of living increase, and the rest is exempt, or what we call capped assessment. So for several years, we've seen a decrease or a closing of the gap between the market and the taxable. And what that was saying is that the market was not increasing more than the cost of living. So it was actually the value of your property was increasing or decreasing at a rate below the cost of living. This year, two things have happened. Taxable assessment has increased, so has market, and in fact the market has increased by more than cost of living. So the cap, the untaxed portion, has increased as well. So that's very much a relief and a good sign. And that, I should say, on assessment, they say there's typically a 2-year lag. So the numbers that we're seeing that we're going to tax in 2017-18 are based on property values from 2015-16. So the turnaround actually occurred a couple of years ago. We're only seeing the fruit of it in terms of property assessment this year. So residential tax rates in the town of Yarmouth since 2006 have steadily decreased, and I want to put an asterisk on that and say the reason that they've increased fairly dramatically in the last few years is not because we've become hawks in terms of cutting that tax rate. It's we've transferred the subsidy to the wastewater rate. So we have a separate charge for wastewater that was not covering the full cost by about $1 million. So we've undertaken a 5-year program of eliminating the subsidy from the tax to put the full cost onto the user fee. And so the rate, both residential and commercial, 5 years ago we did a study. It gave us a plan to go forward, and we've been steadily implementing that plan. So the number you see here for 2018 is not, we're not telling you what the tax rate will be. We're telling you if we just continued with the phase and didn't make any other alterations to the rate, that's what it would be. So in other words, we're moving another 5 cents from the tax rate residential to the user fee. So capped assessment, this is the amount of market assessment that is not taxed, and you can see that slight uptick in 2018, this current fiscal year. We're happy to see that. We're not happy about the cap generally, but it is an indicator of a positive residential property market. Commercial assessment. So this is what our commercial assessment curve looks like, and you can see for the last 4 years we've seen slight but steady increases in our commercial assessment, and that is that's a good sign. It reflects, I think, positively on the commercial sector, but it is not a steep incline. It is a small percentage. So commercial tax rates, the same as the residential tax rates, you can see over the last 4 years, they've been decreasing dramatically. And so when we did the study to phase out the subsidy to the wastewater, we were able to determine what proportion of that should come off the residential rate and what proportion should come off the commercial rate. And again, the 2018 figure here indicates a 7 cent reduction. So that is the amount of subsidy that we're proposing to remove from the tax base and put it on the user fee this year. And again, that isn't your tax rate necessarily. It's only meant to indicate to you the net.
Put your light so they can hear you down.
Yeah, is that the last, Jeff? We're going to do that over 5 years, right? What's the last? Is this year the last year, or the next year?
I believe this year's the last year, is it? Yeah. So
It's the
this would
last
be
year.
this would be the last year. So next year you if nothing else changed, you'd see the line flatten out because there'd be no more subsidy to be removed if it all goes to plan. Now, the market reacts in interesting ways, right? As user fees for a service go up, obviously people will want to use less of the service. And so our wastewater plan is that the wastewater fee completely covers the cost. But if people are using less water, good conservation, then they're paying less in wastewater fees, consuming less. So there may yet be a small adjustment we'll have to make, but that will be more of a housekeeping adjustment than a planned strategic adjustment.
Same thing that happened in Halifax a couple years ago. They did the conservation bit, and then the revenues went down for the water utility.
Yep.
Maybe the wrong time to ask, but the question I have, Jeff, is when we're comparing ourselves on the municipal indicators to other towns and municipalities in the province,
Towns.
how many of them are doing this kind of a separation on that, and how many are not?
It's a mishmash. It's always a tricky game to compare tax rates, but everyone does it.
Yeah.
Because what is covered in the municipal tax rate, there are no two towns that are alike. You consider the number of partnerships we have, that we're into airports and ferry terminals, and we're phasing out our subsidy to wastewater.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think you'll find another town that looks exactly like us.
I wonder how much prospective businesses rely on comparing our tax rate to other places they might go or consider putting, entering into a business. I wonder how much impact that has on the decision making, and whether we're set up to be able to sort of differentiate or advocate the difference between how we're doing it and why we're doing it and what our rate is compared to, say, a competitor.
Our recent experience, and I can only speak to experience, our recent experience is that as the business looks at it a little differently, a little more sophisticated than just looking at the tax rate. They look at what is the, what proportion, what per square foot the taxation is going to be, or
Right.
or what the tax burden is. They calculate
So
it
then
out.
the price of the land, if it's less here, factors into that.
Absolutely, that's our experience, and they do want to talk about it, no question. But at the end of the day, it is ultimately a business decision where they locate, and I think our recent success, and we have had success in that conversation, is we are the only town for an hour, we are the regional center, and business wants to be where people are. And so we have a pretty compelling case with the traffic flows on Stars Road and the fact that we're a regional center and have a vibrant downtown. I think that is starting to show or bear some fruit on our economic development efforts.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, just one other thing to add to that is that we get questions when a business is looking at our community, and they want to talk about things like access to services. So having a wastewater plant that has surplus capacity is a plus for us. Having a great water supply is a plus for us. Good transportation, even our transit system. There's lots of things we have to offer that, and sometimes we're surprised at the things that they kind of grab a hold of and want to talk about.
We never get at it years ago because it's a user pay thing, and like a gas tax, everyone hates it, they don't want it, or what do they call it?
Carbon tax.
The carbon tax. But at the end of the day, when you go to user pay like that, it makes us look a little harder at our consumption of water and what we're doing with the sewer charge. And maybe hopefully that has an impact on how we consume and how we better consume. Anyway, it puts us more to a user pay for those services, and I think that's good.
Sure.
And Cliff, or Councillor Hood, I think, was it 2 years ago, Jerry, a year and a half ago, we went to Kentville and we went through the financial indicators, and Jerry had the exact same question that you asked about if you go compare it to Digby or New Glasgow or Kentville, And they had the same answer as what Jeff just said, is, you know, they can't compare them all because we all don't use the same criteria. So that was a question that Jerry had, and good that you gave the same answer that they gave in Kentville.
We talk.
Yeah, okay, you talked, okay.
I think they're not, in the financial indicators, there's some things we do they don't consider too.
Absolutely.
Right.
We'll get there.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Taxes receivable, this is a good news story, and you can see that at one point, we were up over 1.2, almost 1.3 million in receivable. As of March 31st, 2016, we were just over $600,000 receivable. And so how did we do that? Well, it was a council decision, basically. Two things happened. Of course, our high interest rate, which we got criticized for, is an incentive to pay if you can. And we also moved our tax sale date up a year. So instead of allowing you to be 3 full years in arrears, we now go to the tax sale after 2. And we do have an arrangements policy whereby we can make arrangements for people who really are up against it. But just moving that 1 year has helped people not to dig such a deep hole and allowed us to bring our receivables down. And, you know, we know there's at least one property on Main Street that is a significant portion of what's left outstanding there. So imagine if that were cleared up. So
Yeah.
this is good news.
Very good.
So as a percentage of revenue, it's at just about at 6%. And it was about just over 10%. And we were having a bit of a stubborn time there for a little bit, but down at 6%, we feel very good about that. D-transfer tax. So this is one that you know, I caution reading too much into this chart, because there are, you know, the amount of money we're talking about overall last year was just over $200,000. In a lot of the years here, you see with peaks, there were specific single large transactions that took place that are not repeatable, right? They're not going to repeat every year. So the trend, you'd have to kind of remove those anomalies and see what you have. But at the end of the day, this is just, I take some satisfaction in seeing the number increase, not because we're taxing people more, but because it's an indication of a level of activity out there. And we've already talked about the fact that there appears to be more confidence in the real estate market, which is a good positive external indicator. The room marketing levy. So we collect $2 per room night sold in each of the 4 larger operations in the town. So anyone over 20 rooms. So Lake Lawn, Comfort Inn, Grand Hotel, and Best Western.
Yeah.
So any room night they sell, we collect $2, unless they sell it for over a 30-day period, so long-term stay. What you see in this chart is over the last 3 years, a steady increase, and in fact, this past year, we reached a peak with the room levy. That's the most we've ever received, which means that is the highest number of rooms sold in our area since we started collecting the tax. And bear in mind that back in 2007, there were several more players in the market contributing this money than there are today. So a lot of businesses, when we were in our decline here, went out of business. A lot of motels got switched to apartments, or just simply changed their business, or quit their business. So fewer players and a peak this year, which is great to see. So we do have a financial condition index that's put together by the Department of Municipal Affairs. UNSM and AMA participate in the development of the indicators. They're to use for conversation, and so that's what I'm hoping we will do today. And they give you some level of comparability with other towns, but as we've already talked about, there are no 2 exactly alike towns, and so there is a caution there to read too much into them. But it does, you will see as we get into it, that some of our good practices are reflected in these indicators. So the first one, revenue indicators. Did I skip a slide here? Nope. Okay. So revenue indicators. So the first is an indicator of your reliance on other levels of government. So it's the percentage of your revenue that comes from other levels of government. In 2015-16, so the bottom row across, you'll see that we're at 5%. The reason I'm using this chart is you can see the past 4-year history as well. So we're at 5%, and we're pretty stable around that level in terms of the amount of our revenue that comes from the provincial federal government. Uncollected taxes as of the date of the indicators was at 7.3%. So again, trending downward, which we're proud of. 3-year change in tax base. So this is looking back at our assessment over the last 3 years, and you can see that ours is at 0.1%, which is almost no change. And this is 2015-16, so there is a lag in the indicators. So we were very, very flat. Very flat, and that's difficult to manage within when you're trying to provide services to a community, because it's reflective of the values of the property, what the confidence is, and what the personal equity people might have in their homes, and it also restricts your revenue unless you're willing to increase the tax rate. And in an economic slowdown, increasing the tax rate is never seen as necessarily a positive signal from government. So commercial property as a percentage of your revenue, we're at 31.9%. So 20% is the threshold, or the threshold for towns. They want you to be over 20%. We're 31.9, so we're pretty good. Reliance on a single taxpayer. Our largest taxpayer pays 4.3% of our tax levy. They want to make sure it's below 10. You can imagine that a large industry presence could be more than 10%, and that presents a level of risk to a community if that taxpayer were to move or go under. So, and we've seen that in Hantsport as an example. The town, in fact, folded up their tent when they lost 2 large taxpayers. So we have a less risk on that side. So budget indicators, residential tax efforts. So this is the percentage of the average household income that is required to pay the average residential tax bill in the town. The threshold, or where DMA believes it should be, is below 4%. We are at 4.8%. So we're slightly above that. And we don't have the highest tax rate in the province by far. But what we figured out, and we did some looking at this carefully, is that if our average household income was at the provincial average, then we would be below the threshold. So our issue is not the tax rate or the tax bill, it's the income level. And so again, why is it important that we're involved in economic development? Because economic prosperity really matters to the community in all kinds of ways. This is an indicator that there's work to be done. Right? We can't provide the services that our community needs at a tax burden level that is at or below the threshold.
And yet we're doing it.
No, we're above the threshold. We're above 4%.
But they're red.
They're red, which is not a good thing.
Okay.
But it's because of the household income, which is the issue that we, why we focus or put some effort into economic development. So number of deficits in the past 5 years, they obviously want you to be at 1 or less. We are not allowed to budget a deficit, so we always have to balance the budget when we set the budget. And so we have incurred 2 deficits in the past 5 years. So I talked to our municipal advisor last week to talk about that issue and among many others, but his comment to me was that he wasn't concerned. One of the reasons he wasn't concerned is that one of the deficits was in the area of $10,000 on a $17 million budget, so it wasn't a significant deficit. Last year, I think our projected surplus was under 10,000, so we've been budgeting very close, and sometimes you miss by a little bit, and that's what happened one of the years. The other years, we had a blip in our pension fund, and that caused a deficit because when our actuaries do their work, if they find that based on their projections, there's insufficient funds to meet all of our obligations in the pension fund, that dip comes directly onto our financial statements on our income statement. So it's not a cash immediate this year cash liability or expense in any way. It is a long-term, it's in your investment, it's long-term, and yet instead of just showing up on your balance sheet, it hits your income statement. And it is what it is, but it's not a cause for concern.
It's a good thing, because I don't understand a word you just said in the last 2 minutes.
Anybody? Anybody got me? Anybody with me? Okay.
Phil would be.
Okay.
We're good, though. Go ahead, Cliff, if there's something you...
Yeah. Okay, so residential tax effort is the amount of the average household income that is required to pay the average residential tax bill.
Where do they get the household income number from?
Stats Canada.
So
Okay.
ours is low.
Ours is low. We talked about that earlier on, that we
Yes.
were about $12,000 below the provincial average for household income for towns. So when you do the math on that, you figure out that pretty quickly, if our average household income was at the town average, we're below the threshold, we're green, we're good.
Yeah.
So the issue, as we see it, isn't that we're overtaxing, it's that our ratepayers have a lower average household income.
Yeah.
And so that's why we put effort and resources into economic development, because we can't ignore the fact that if our citizens are not prospering, it's going to be hard to have a viable community and provide the services they need.
It doesn't cost me as much to go to the drugstore or the grocery store or anything else as it does somebody in Halifax who's got to drive halfway across the city.
Yeah.
So
this is not comparing to...
you know, so it's not disposable income, it's household income.
Right.
And that could be, if it were disposable income, it would be a better measure. Anyway,
They're not perfect, and that's one of the reasons that we refer to them as discussion items, because we found some flaws, and I'll talk about one in just a minute, flaws in some of the calculations that, you know, might mislead you if you didn't have the conversation. So I would never send the indicators out to you as council and say, here, chew on this and go ahead and make your decisions. I'd rather present them to you, and when there are questions or observations, let's talk about them. What do they mean? What are the implications around what we should do as a town?
and so the operating reserves, this is the final question I have.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, my interpretation of that column is that we're well above where where we need to be. Am I right on that?
Yes,
Yeah.
according to their measure.
So in other words, when it says above 5, 10, 10, 10, we're
Way above.
We're at
way
19
above. really.
19.7.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So liquidity ratio is just your, current assets over current liabilities. And so if you had to, can you meet all your current liabilities? And obviously we're in good shape that way as well. The threshold is 1, they want you to be able to pay everything. We're at 2.7, so we're quite liquid. So here's the page that we take a lot of pride in, and what sets us apart. So debt servicing. They want you to be below 15%. If you get over 15%, you start to get visits from municipal affairs. Our debt service cost as a proportion of our own source revenue is 3.3%. So 3.3% of the taxation that we levy goes to debt servicing, so that's principal and interest both.
So put your,
Yes.
so on what?
So we borrowed.
For example?
We borrowed in the past. We borrowed to do Charles Crosby Drive. We borrowed for a project on Southeast Street.
That's
we
right.
borrowed for a wastewater plant years ago. So
Okay.
we have, in the last few years, we've retired a lot of debt. So if it shows here, we've gone from 5% down to 3.3. So
Okay.
when we borrow, we have to borrow through the Municipal Finance Corporation, and so you get tied into debentures, and so there is no early retirement of your debt. You set yourself on a schedule when you take the debt in the first place, and then you just have to work it through. We would be lower than this. Jerry and I both have some regrets on one situation where we borrowed money over a period of time that turned out to be longer than we needed. We could have had that even lower. Some would argue that you should have some, you should use debt, and certainly you should, but our view is that we need to do enough out of our current operating revenues to cover our depreciation, and then debt is the kind of thing you hold back for the emergency, the situation that is either extra large or really unexpected and you're not prepared for. So we have plenty of capacity in that regard. So outstanding debt, I'm not really sure what this indicator is supposed to tell you. Let me tell you how it's calculated. It is the amount of debt we have as a proportion of our uniform assessment. Our uniform assessment is the total assessed value of all the properties in town. I'm not sure what you can glean from that is useful information, except we're well below the threshold. So I guess that is saying if you have a tax base of so many millions of dollars, you've got to be careful about how much debt you take and you're going to service with that tax base. That's about the only thing
I'm just hearing ability to pay with those two things.
Yeah.
Cliff?
Assessed value or taxable assessed?
Uniform assessment is, I think it's total market.
Total market.
It's the total markup, and so if we're only collecting taxes on 50 or 75% or whatever the number is, it's not.
Well, the tax exempt, anything that's exempt through legislation, so schools and that sort of stuff, that wouldn't be included. What is included, though, is when we give grants to organizations.
So like the museum, for instance, that we're going to be discussing shortly, that would not be that would be included in this number.
Yes.
Because it is assessed.
Yes.
We give a grant, and
that's on us.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so undepreciated assets, there is an error in this calculation. Okay, so this we've given feedback to municipal affairs on this. So it's the percentage of your total capital assets that is undepreciated. In other words, what's the overall useful life? What percentage of the useful life of all of your assets remains? You'll see that ours has been declining from the earliest year over the past 5 years, from 69% down to 64%. Why we believe the formula is flawed is because every one of those years we've invested more than the depreciation. So that number should be going up, not coming down. And when we looked at the calculation to figure out what was going on, we realized that we would have to spend, the town of Yarmouth would have to spend $9 million per year on capital just to hold the number steady. And that's absolutely ridiculous, right? That is well beyond reason. So the formula is flawed in just how it's calculated. What they're trying to show you is what is the useful life of your tangible capital assets based on original purchase costs. Ours should be going up, not coming down. So they've asked us for feedback recently. We've given it, and hopefully they'll address that. So 5-year capital purchases, and this bears out what I've been saying. So 5-year capital purchases is how much have you spent on capital relative to 5 years of depreciation of your tangible capital assets. So if our depreciation is, say, $2 million a year, 5 years is $10 million, we're at 188%. So we've spent 18 million on tangible capital assets over the last 5 years. How can we be getting behind? We can't. We're getting ahead. They want you to be at 100. They want you to spend your depreciation. In other words, renew your assets. We're doing that almost twofold. And but on the other indicator, they tell us we're falling behind. 5-year contribution to capital reserves, yes, it's capital reserves, Jerry?
Yep.
So 87.1%, and that's a proportion of the 5 years of depreciation. So that is it for those indicators. And as I said, that's the page there that we put a lot of emphasis on because, as we said before, the reason we're here is to provide services to the public, and the reason the town is specifically here is to provide infrastructure to provide those services. And so looking after that infrastructure is job one. So the infrastructure deficit. Generally, infrastructures are pipes, our plants, our streets, our buildings, and equipment. The infrastructure deficit was estimated at $123 billion in 2007, of which the town owns a piece, no question. But since 2005, we have been steadily decreasing our share while also reducing our debt. So we've been funding more than our depreciation. We've been getting ahead on our infrastructure and also reducing our debt. We've invested over $27 million in our infrastructure over the past 10 years while reducing our debt from $5.8 million down to $2.9 million. So we've cut our debt load in half and put $27 million into infrastructure. So for a small town of 7,000 people, that's looking after job one, the infrastructure. That's all I have, folks. That is just a few things to talk about or to think about as we head into the budget season. Next committee of the whole, we hope to have perhaps a capital budget for you to look at, to start thinking about, and then we'll move into the operating budget once we have that put to bed. Sorry, one more comment.
Yes.
And during that time, we'll also deal with grants to organizations and try to get those things decided prior to the start of next fiscal year.
Okay, so number one, before I forget, grants to organizations. Do we have the ability to sit down as a group and talk about it? Or how are we doing that? Did we decide that? We're not going to have everybody come in and present.
Yeah, so what we've done, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just what we've done in the past, what you do in the future is of course your choice
Yeah.
as a council. So we used to have every year, if you applied for a grant, you had an opportunity to come sit at this table, present for 5 minutes to council, and we spent a Saturday listening to people. In some cases, they would just simply ask if we had questions. Then you would go away, and we gave every councillor a spreadsheet with all the names of the organizations, the amount they asked for, and an amount that we were going to spend on grants. And your job was to allocate the money yourself individually. And then what we would do as staff is we'd collect those 7 sheets, Linda would average them out, and we'd have a number, the average amount given to each organization by council. We'd bring that back, we'd round it to the nearest $10, and in every case that we've done that, council's approved that as the motion. So they've agreed in terms of the decision-making how the process would go. Last year, the difference is we did not have the meeting with the organizations. Council simply received a copy of every application. They were available online, and then council made their individual decisions on their spreadsheet, submitted to Linda, and we came up with the number. If you wish to, we will do whatever you wish in terms of assisting you to make those decisions.
Okay. Go ahead, Jen.
Could we do it, not do it? I'd like to do it the same as last year. I've already got information from Linda for last year's disbursements and been working on it actually. So I don't think that we need to meet with all of the groups, the 43 of them that's on the list. And then we can just meet, we don't even have to meet about that. We can just send them in to Linda, each of us, and then Linda can put them together, and then we can talk about them at a committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, yeah, so Linda has the spreadsheet ready. I'm fine with that as well. I just want to make sure there's nobody at the table that, if anybody feels like we want to sit down as a council and hash over anything in case there's extra questions or, you know, we don't, I don't know, I know what I'm thinking, but, you know, I guess I don't want us to miss something. But I think we've all got the capacity to just reach out to somebody and ask, you know, if there's a concern. Is anybody wanting to sit down and have the presentations? You good? Okay.
Maybe, Your Worship, maybe the only thing is something like the antique car show. I'd like to see maybe Mr. Robichaud and Denton Ford come in, maybe not do a presentation on the grants to organization part, but maybe just a general overview of what they did the last couple of years and where they plan to go, because I think they have a couple of new ideas in the hopper that they want to do. So I know we want to grow that, like try to make that our War for At rally.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to to bring them in, maybe,
So
maybe
how about
a presentation to the committee of the whole?
Yeah,
or-
make a
yeah.
motion today for them to come into the next committee of the whole.
Make a motion, we invite the antique car show people to come in to give us an overview of the show for 2017.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Question's been called, all those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. Okay, so we're good, everybody? Linda, you'll get those out? Yep, she can get them out in the next few days and just have a deadline to get them back in. And then if anyone has any extra questions, concerns, just reach out to whoever you think may be able to answer that. Good? Thanks for that, Jeff. That was good. It was good. So it's a lot. I really want to understand all of it. Okay. All right, CAO report. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Your Worship, I've circulated my report. My report is a summary of the motions of council that are in progress and have been completed over the last month. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them now or at any time in the future.
Okay, good. Fire department, the chief is here. Any questions? Anything for the chief?
The other night, when we were doing our other business, at some point in the discussion, Chief, there was mention made of a new fire hall, and we're in the process of doing some renos out there to give some renewed and ongoing life to the existing fire hall. So I need a little update on which way we're going on this.
Yeah, at the meeting we had, I said new fire hall, but I'm talking about land and response time. I'm not talking about an actual structure. As a chief, it's my responsibility to make sure in time, when the time does come, that we have a new station.
You weren't talking about structure at all?
No, I was talking about land, but I used the term fire hall, and everybody kind of got,
Yeah,
you know.
okay.
So basically, part of my job is looking forward a number of years, most of the times 10 to 20 years sometimes, for land for station location. And I need to know that so that I can know where it's going to be. So I'm doing a lot of research in that, and that's what I was talking about. If we, as an example, put the fire department down that end of the town, the response time for this end is going to be a lot further, and so on and so on. So my concern is making sure there is land available for the future and making sure we take a look at it.
He's answered my question.
Yeah, mine too. 'Cause
I had a wrong take on it, Chief.
Yes, I
Or
know
an
that.
incorrect,
And that's what I was trying to correct at that meeting, because he made it sound like I was doing something I
Well,
wasn't supposed to be doing. But every chief does this all the time.
In fairness to you, because of what we were discussing, it wasn't, you had to cut that off, and you didn't get a chance to really explain it to anybody, so thank you.
Good. Anything else for the chief? Straight ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, chief. Okay, planning department. Maurice is not here. We can certainly direct any questions to him through email or visit. Okay, go ahead.
Your Worship, Morris Lloyd will be with us for the council meeting in February, and he will be in town at least a day, maybe two before that. So if anyone had particular questions around planning that they wanted to have a few minutes with the planner, there will be that opportunity. I'd suggest letting either Linda or Judy in the planning department know if you have that interest, and Mr. Lloyd can work it into his itinerary.
Good. Go ahead.
So I understand there's been responses to the RFP that was issued in relation to Water Street a while back. When or when, either way, those reports be available to council?
So, Your Worship, I talked to Morris Lloyd about that since the meeting on Monday. So what had happened was the RFP was conducted when Caroline was still here. She's gone off on maternity leave, and so Morris had her recommendation. It was determined by previous council that that would be deferred to this year's budget. Given the scope of what we talked about on Monday, I asked to have both the RFP document as well as the responses to review. Talked to Morris Lloyd, and both of us are of the opinion that the scope may be actually larger than what was initially called for. So we may amend we may recommend rejecting all proposals and reissuing based on the expanded scope. But I want to look at that before I make a definitive on that. He and I discussed the process, and we're on the same page in terms of how we would do that. And one of the first things that we would do, if we're suggesting an alteration in scope, is we'd bring the RFP call document to you to review, to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what our expectations are out of the process. So that's a step that oftentimes in the past we've not done, and it sometimes leads to I guess a confusion or what have you between what council's direction is and what is actually delivered at the end product. So we want to try and avoid that, make sure we're all on the same page.
Good. Okay. Engineers report. Dave's here. If anybody has any questions for Dave, there's lots going on. Anything else you want to share with us, David? You good?
I don't think so. I noticed I left the Brunswick Street traffic lights off my list of capital items, but sometimes it's so obvious you don't see it. But most of the projects are listed as per my report.
Mm-hmm. So on the second page there, Cliff, I don't know if you got it right in front of you, but Lake George Ecological Stream Maintenance Flows, is that what you were talking about, measuring the flows over? That's that piece. Okay.
Actually, there were two things I was looking at, but
Water
to be honest with you, half of my scrambling around today on town stuff was because I thought today was council meeting in February.
I know. I know.
That's why I wasn't here at 3:30. I was up at the chiropractor's office, and I had to bolt out of there. Then Charlie called. That's what I've been doing. My back's hurting.
I tried to text. I did. I said to Jeff, I'm pretty sure that meeting's not till. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Thanks, Dave. Finance, Jerry, do we have any money? According to Jeff, we're doing pretty good.
I won't set budget expectations just yet. Not that far along. I did attach a November statement. I'm close to having the December done, just not quite finished for you. I just want to point out that when I do the statements for you, I'm looking at a report like this that's 39 pages long, and that's the detail that I go through to end up with a one-page summary for yourself. So I won't bore you with what's in here. So at a very high level, we're following along budget pretty well to the end of November, and I haven't seen anything yet in the December numbers that give me any concern. The only other thing I do want to point out, just for information, is about a week ago, got a phone call. So we are now in the middle of, just to add a little bit of work for us, an Hst audit. So you might hear some comments around an Hst audit in the next few weeks or months to come. Just a heads up.
They're always fun. Recreation, Frank's not here, but if anybody wants to ask Frank any questions. Economic development, Natalie? Oh, did you have, yep, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I should pass on Frank Grant's regrets. He has the flu, and he did make an effort to contact me to let you know that there's a reason he's not here. He's unwell, so.
Good. He's well. Oh, help us. Okay, go ahead, Natalie.
I have to apologize. I didn't get my staff report out to you in advance, so it was
Fine.
printed and put on your desks today.
Oh, that's what that is. That's not it? Operations, no? Oh, yeah, prepared by Natalie Smith.
So of interest, if I could share with you,
Certainly.
I am part of an organizing committee with Nova Scotia Works, the Yarmouth group, and we're doing a job fair in April. So this comes out of recognition of some of the business-to-business work that has been happening with Nova Scotia Works, which is the new job resource center that merged the Inclusive Society, the Black Employment Career Resources. That's now one group. So we're working towards an April 22nd job fair, and part of it is not just to look at the employment requirements today, but to look with prospective employers what their needs are in the midterm to long term. Part of it is we're trying to do a paradigm shift. You'll hear me use that word often when I talk about things that I'm involved with, is to see how we could have a virtual interaction in the job fair. So for those people, because of confidentiality, don't want to come into the particular site, there's an opportunity for them to sign up and to be interviewed online via computer with the prospective employer. Also, using technology that way, we want to have a very far grasp. So if, for example, we're looking for ICT people, what we might do then is actually target alumni universities or colleges or places where hubs, ICT hubs, where people can then access that interview or information via the internet versus physically being here. So we're looking at a little bit of a different ways of how we do job fairs, and we hope that we'll be able to create a good template that we can move forward with whenever we need to have that done. So just wanted to share that with you, that that's happening, and more details will be shared as we start to build that.
Good. Any questions for Natalie? Go ahead. Oh, was somebody else? Okay, Jeff had his light on.
I just wanted to point out, Natalie, that in the 3 pages of report, and there's a lot of stuff there, you got a full plate. I think the most understated thing in your whole report is item 3.1. And I understand there's
Yes.
yeah, there's not much you can share publicly,
No.
But you have had a significant increase in the number of approaches you've had from businesses, from investors, and asking about the kind of stuff we talked about earlier, trying to find locations in the town that suit their business needs, and that is both a very positive sign and a hopeful sign. So,
Yeah.
and it's understated in here in terms of the amount of work you do
Right.
in that regard. So I just want to
Right.
point that out so council knows that there is fruit
Yes.
that is on the vine.
Almost ripe.
Almost ripe.
And if council wishes to have in-camera reports that I could provide to the CAO to provide to you, then I would be more than happy to, just that I cannot share it in a public forum.
Yeah. There's always irons in the fire. It's funny because in the public, all of the ideas that come, you know, you need to land a flight service, or you need to get a business here, or you need to, they're all ongoing. I don't think I've bumped into anything that people have said we should do that we're not working on. So good on you.
I agree.
Good on you. Jim?
Hi, Natalie. We had a conversation recently about the transit system.
Yes.
And I know you're going to be working on that. So that, it's a year old, right? Year old?
Yes, February.
Soon, anyway.
Yes, it was
Very
actually
soon.
on my anniversary page of my Facebook. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just looking forward to an update on the viability of it, and also maybe a contest to name the bus. Maybe.
Right. So I should probably do an update for my February committee of the whole. So the internal staff, we did have a review in December, and a couple of actions came out of that. One is to review the transit route. and looking at the viability of the different stops based on ridership. The other thing was to see whether there were gaps in our service offerings and how potentially we could accomplish that. So I'm working with operations, Chad LeBlanc, and with our planner, Morris, to see, just to work through some analysis before we share anything publicly. And then the third thing is that we've had we introduced the cash fare, which has been overly successful to the point where it represents 50% of the fare on the bus. So that affects us in two ways. One is we're not able to capture data, which is part of using the smart card system, and it potentially also is a burden and a security issue with regards to on the bus. That wasn't the original intention. So part of it, the action was, how can we create a fun marketing promotion to get people to ride the bus. So I've got some ideas. Councillor McLeod and I were chatting, so hope to share that with you once we flesh it out a little bit more and maybe get your input as well.
Turn it into a party bus. Okay. Okay, any more questions for Natalie? Thank
welcome.
you very much. Okay, business update on community asset donation program. That's exactly what it is. Where are we? Only because I had somebody approach me about wanting to do something with it.
Your Worship, the park staff and operations staff are working on putting together that list of and prices on those items so that people can engage and begin acquiring or paying for assets within the town.
Oh. Okay. So we have a list of stuff that people can purchase. Can people just donate money? That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, so people can donate money anytime they like. We don't, that's right. We just issue a receipt and it's tax deductible. What the community asset program is if somebody wanted to, they put a bench out there and in memory of somebody or something, a pet or whatever, we would have a standard bench with a price that includes the cost of acquisition, installation, and reasonable short-term maintenance. So that's the program and a way of recognizing that contribution on whatever that asset is. And so that was the intention of that program, and it's just been, we've asked operational staff to work on it, and because they know the parks and the streets and so on, and it's just difficult to find the time to do the research necessary to make sure that we're getting, we're properly going to be able to recognize people and getting a fair value for the different types of assets.
Okay. So, and part of this was in conjunction with the dog park.
Right.
How can I donate for that? So, okay, good. And Milton Park, yeah, so all those pieces. Okay, thank you. Senior Safety Officer?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I don't know if that's quite the...
I think it is.
I talked to somebody that's in the community services housing program, and they were saying that there might be an opportunity, so I'd like to make a motion that we explore the option for a senior, I'm going to call it facilitation officer, either full or part-time through community services or housing. So I think there might be a funding opportunity that maybe we could explore that and then see what entails, and then staff can come back with a report. So I don't know if there's anything there, but the person that works for community services or housing said there might be an opportunity there.
Good.
And what would they do? I think they would do anything from facilitating getting them into seniors' homes, bringing them into the town of Yarmouth, kind of, almost, kind of, there's a...
So Doris and another lady do
They
this.
do something in the municipality that
yeah.
do, they do anything from appointments to getting people into people's homes for home care. There's a whole list of things, but I don't know what that person was exactly saying to me, but they said there could be an opportunity there. So I know you have places like Andrew Cameron's place and John Daly and some other ones that have built some very expensive properties in the town of Yarmouth that maybe somebody needs some help moving into the town of Yarmouth with maybe a lease or something like that, right? So that's an industry all in itself now. So I don't know what that person would entail or what's out there, but just if we could explore the opportunity, that's all I'm looking for.
Good. Okay. Go ahead.
Am I
Which
up?
way? Yeah, you're on.
So,
Cliff.
Philip, do you think that would be funded by the province?
That was the indication from the person that worked for
And then,
community services or housing. There might be an opportunity there.
So I think, if I might, right now, when they do this in the municipality, I think they even do it in Argyle. I stand corrected, but they do something like that.
Funded by the province and they downloaded it.
They downloaded it.
well, that's, all right, so
Yeah.
the follow-up to my question was, a
Yeah.
lot of these deals, we get the
Yeah.
federal or provincial money for a year
Yeah.
or two,
Yeah.
and then we're on, our
Yeah.
you know, and what do you do with, you're stuck with it because you don't have
Yeah.
the people want it, they need it.
Yeah,
Um,
so they.
All right,
download.
okay,
We'll just see
Yeah.
what the options
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. And that's it. You're exactly right. So because I had the conversation, I think we're thinking the same person. We had the same conversation, and the first thing I said was just that we can't, the reason the town hasn't funded it in the past, and I can only speak for the last 4 years because it's been brought to the table, is because we don't want to take the chance of it being downloaded on us. It's not ours, but at the same time, we need it. So we have to be careful. Go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to ask who, if the motion passes, who would do the searching for us as a result of the possible passing of the motion?
I think she was just sitting over there, maybe.
She's so loaded. Staff. Yeah.
I wonder how the program would go if the province said, here's a program for senior facilitator or whatever, you give us 50-cent dollars and we'll put a person in place. Why don't they do that?
Maybe because nobody's asked.
Well, there's a reason they don't do it, and it's because it's easy to get out. If you're not the one providing the service, if you're not, taking our money and them being responsible has a longer term implication for them, even if the cost sharing is the same. And that's the responsibility you take on when you take their money, is that you'll be the one cutting the program if in fact down the road they pull their money and you can't afford it.
Councilor Wood just said it, I think.
Yep, exactly.
About what?
That's right. You okay there, Jim? I can see the wheels are turning. I read you like a book. Go ahead.
I just don't want any backlash. I want, if we're going to proceed, I want to proceed positively and carefully so that if there's a failure some way along the way, I don't want any backlash. I'm prepared to support the motion.
Good. So it's moved and seconded. I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. Request for decision, South Centennial School, CAO.
So I'm looking for council direction on what to do with the school. And, we had made a decision back in, I think it was December, to market the school. And then we had some things happen in the community with the Boys and Girls Club. Immediately the school became a useful asset with regard to them. Hope was interested. The hospital had issues. More recently, I've been approached by, of course, we were approached by the food bank looking for a place. I've been approached by a church group. I've been approached by, Councillor Barry brought to light there's a youth group that was an enrichment program that has failed to be successful at the high school because of the proximity, the walking distance to the residential area. So it got me to thinking that the value of that property as a community asset might be more than we had realized, and maybe more than other schools that we've dealt with in the past. So the question is whether or not what direction you want to take on this, because I'm a little concerned that our decision might have been quick because of our experience with other schools, and yet there might be a community in need of some infrastructure and some services or place to carry out their activities to support their community that we didn't think about. So the request is that you consider investigating the cost and benefit of retaining South Centennial School as social infrastructure, and I would suggest in that we would explore retention options, whether it be us retain it as our own, or that we somehow put it in the hands of an independent society, perhaps made up of community members, stakeholders, or some other model. But I think it might warrant an additional look, and for that reason, I've put it back on your agenda. And if your answer is, Mr. CAO, put the for sale sign on it, I respect that, but I didn't want to just proceed with that without further discussion.
Okay, let's see what we have here. We have Councillor Cleveland.
Before I get going, that sounded bad, didn't it? It's not. Before I get going, I was just curious as to whether it has been assessed at some kind of a market value. Has any of that been done? No, not at all. Well, to me, this place is at a really great spot for the South End. I went to school there. I hated seeing that building go away as it was. I mean, the onslaught of time or anything. You're never going to hear me fight the fact that the move was made. But that's fine. It's done. But that is a fantastic area to have. Well, there already is a ground there, a playground. There's lots of facility there. It's fully operational. It can't be in particularly bad shape. It can't be because it's fairly new. I would think that would be an extremely useful spot for community services, be it daycares, which have been discussed, any kind of a group of any kind. How you exactly would run it or how expensive that would be, I don't know. But in theory, I think that's something that we really should consider strongly.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think the investigate the costs is a great idea, Jeff, because from what I understood, when they had the school board go down and do the presentation at South Centennial, Steve Stoddard was there and Jerry Purdy and everybody. And I thought the cost, they said, to run the school, maintain it, insure it, lights, all the other things, was anywhere from $13,000 to $16,000 a month. So I don't know how you'd break up that cost, if that could fall back on the taxpayers of Yarmouth, because then you're talking a close to $200,000 budget item for the year, and then you're talking about upkeep, you're talking about anything happens to the roof. It is a great facility. I like Wade, Councillor Cleveland mentioned, I like the aspect that they have the basketball courts in the back, they have the playground equipment on one side. It's a great location close to the golf course. There's plenty of opportunity for the building, I think, in a housing setting, but if there's a social opportunity, if the food bank ever wanted to go in there or any other organization, would have to see what it would cost us. Not only in the short term, it's easy on the short term, but when you're paying, amount of money every month, are we getting into a community services based programming that that we already pay for one way? But what do you entail, Jeff, in the analysis with the social infrastructure? Are you going to be talking to all community use groups, have a meeting, have a...
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I'm just going to let him answer that question, and then you guys can have your...
Yeah, so I would suggest there'd have to be a level of engagement with the community. What are the interests? Talking to some of the potential users, and also going to the school board. We know that Steve, when they decided to close the school, it wasn't because of the condition of the school. It was about the cost, right? They were consolidating students into one operation, saving money. And so there is cost. They know what they are, and they can share that. And they also did another study which looked at refurbishing the facility for office use. So I know they've taken kind of a deeper look. So getting that information and looking at what the community interest is, and at the end of the day, I have no doubt that it will not break even. there's no way that you can generate enough revenue. And if it's simply a business question, then the answer is obvious and you go no further. But if there's value in having a space that allows the community to do some things that otherwise they're finding it difficult right now, you have to weigh that out. And I'm not saying I have an opinion one way or the other at this point. It's just that because of the number of inquiries, I just thought it's something that you should talk about and give some direction on.
Thank you, Your Worship. In reading your two-page asking for direction, just for getting it on the table, many models could be considered. And one is operator cells, two is put in control of a society to operate, or put into control of one social service entity with a mandate to accommodate others. And I would be in favor of number 3 at that point. This is just for discussion purposes.
Oh, Stan, did you two just turn your lights off? Okay, go ahead, Cliff.
Well, I share the Deputy Mayor's concerns, but on the other hand, I'm listening to what the CEOs had to say. I went down to the school and went in and visited while the Boys and Girls Club were setting up in there. And, I hadn't probably been in for some years because probably the last time I was in there was during an election, maybe 8 years ago or something, but it does appear to be in reasonably good shape. And so when I saw what was happening there that day, and at that time there was some potential to have some doctors go down there and this and that, I was thinking that, in fact, it changed my mind a bit because, to be honest, I was thinking with it, let's get rid of it the quicker the better, get it off our hands and back on the tax rolls, and frankly, head off any of the non-profit type operations that might go in there. But I'm thinking different about it. Really what I think we ought to do maybe is hit the pause button for 6 months and see what unfolds. I don't know, but I really think that maybe it was a little bit precipitous to go out and sell it. That's my thoughts.
Good.
Your Worship, I'll make the motion that Council consider investigating the cost and benefit of retaining Centennial School as a social infrastructure,
Okay,
or the recommendation from the CAO.
all right. I'll second that motion. Okay. Did you want to say something? You put your light on a couple times, so you don't have to.
I think it's a great location for like some of the organizations that we have, especially like say the food bank, but I was wondering if we could do some type of looking into having it like mixed uses so that some people pay, some organizations, like the food bank, because they give, they don't have money. I don't mean for every organization. Some organizations would have to pay, but I think it's a perfect location that people could use.
Wade's Walking Clinic.
Exactly. And even there's some doctors that may want to set up there,
Yeah, maybe not.
but they'd have to pay.
Maybe not.
It's an office.
Maybe not.
No office?
No, not there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, right, yes.
yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
there is organizations that could afford to pay.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you.
Good stuff. So I just jotted down a couple things. Of course, I'm going writing fast and furious. I'm thinking probably like you guys, the insurance. Somebody says playground, and I used to think fun. Now I think insurance. That's where I go. I shouldn't. I think we could, if we pulled together the right blend, seek community services financing. Absolutely, because they're doing this all over the province with different buildings, the reuse of them. So that's a conversation we could have. I'm just throwing this out there. We need to remember we don't want to be landlords, so we have to measure that. And I think, Jeff, as part of the process, we ask the neighbors when we do something like this. I remember the signs going up, that Caroline used to put the signs up, so we ask the neighbors, and maybe in the process of all this that we find a lead. I'm going to say this as well, that part of what the deputy was asking about, what could go and things like that, what are the needs? I think that that task force that starts on Tuesday is going to come up with that. We're starting social mapping right away, where we're going to get a really defined list of what's out there, everything that's out there, and everything that's missing, and what the community needs, and then engage the community and find out, you know, what is it you want, and you have to be careful, you know, the wants and the needs, you kind of gotta measure, give the needs first. And then the first thing I wrote down is, you know what, we're sitting at this table to do what's best for the greater good of the community. And I think it's like Wade said to begin, beautiful spot. I couldn't say sell it fast enough like Cliff, and then just like that, you know, you look at who's asking, and wow, what a beautiful facility for us to be able to do a really great, you know, social gathering for the community, and then just be able to look and say, wow, you know, we really did something great, and it encompassed a lot of things. So I'm really excited about what comes out of this. I'm all for it within the parameters of what we can do and all those pieces.
I just want to make sure that Philip's motion covers what we're talking about. That's all, so that we're...
Have you got it, Linda? Go ahead, Jeff.
I just have one question in my mind is, what is the financial level of effort you want to put into that investigation?
Oh, wow. Like, you're not talking, we go out and do a study to see what? 6 months. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking we're going to have to engage somebody to help us with pieces of this.
Okay.
There's
Do is if you could create a cluster of, like, you know, social service type agencies and entities. It might be, you know, there's strength in numbers, that kind of thing.
Did you hear Jim?
Yeah, I did. But I just need an indication. Are we talking 10 or are we talking 50? And so
We're not talking, I'm not talking 50, but I'm only one. $50,000 go a long way with a lot of social organizations, much less.
And the other thing I was thinking, maybe to answer Councilor McLeod, I think maybe if we got together with the community groups that were interested in the facility, see what they were willing to pay or what they could pay, then you could come up with a financial concept of what the building would cost you to run. If you talked to Mr. Stoddard and said the building costs you $12,000, average $12,000 a month, and you have 5 community groups that go in there and say, we have the wherewithal or the ability to pay $4,500 a month between the 6 user groups, then you say, then you weigh the costs and the benefits of the difference between whatever it costs you to run the building and what you can get in rent or what they pay you. That's the thing. And the thing I'm scared about is I think all the ideas are good, but you're going to come across a problem one of these days that there's going to be an organization that said maybe at one time we could pay you $1,000 a month, but we're not in the position now to honor our lease or honor the amount that we said we could pay you, right? So now you're down from 45 to 35. But I think if you got the user groups together, see what they could generate, and then you go from there.
There are models out there, so I can probably give. Well, I'm just thinking that I can call the minister, and she just, every time I call, she gives me a list of whatever I'm looking for, but she would be able to give me a list of those that we can at least talk to. Yeah. Scoot up and talk to them. Go ahead. Did you have your? You sure?
Yep.
If you'll permit me.
You didn't get the money yet.
Jeff may know better than me, but I would think that Steve Stoddard numbers are school board numbers, and when they're setting about closing the school and taking the heat for doing it, they would put the highest numbers up, the worst case scenario numbers up, and it's a good chance that if you took those numbers and really got fine-toothed it, it would be substantially less to keep the building going and keep it properly maintained. I may be wrong, but I would look at it.
I thought it, but I would never said it.
Well,
It does cost much less for
you know,
private
in
to
other
do it
words,
as
if
opposed-
the agenda of the school board is to close the school, they're going to make the
Yes.
worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So, go ahead.
I think the high school, didn't that cost us around 120,000 a year too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's 3 times or 4 times the size.
exactly.
Did
It's
you hear
bigger.
that?
Pardon?
Did you hear Jeff?
Heat and insurance,
Yeah. Never mind fixing broken windows and
right.
all kinds of other things.
But it was a way bigger building and different floor levels, where this school down there is just one level. Yeah, but anyway, right.
Yeah. Okay, so motion's on the floor? Question's been called. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. Boy, I'm telling you, we're just moving right along. Request for decision, EMO magnet. Sorry.
Oh my goodness, so this magnet, so I was doing some work on the magnet, and I wanted to put a close to it, and I thought, you know, here we are telling EMO what to do, how to do their business, and it is their business to make the public aware of them, so I think we simply refer the suggestion to them, along with the information I've collected, and let them decide what they need to do within their resources in order to make the public more aware of how to get a hold of them in the case of emergency.
Absolutely. Jim?
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Would the other two municipal units have the same request to EMO, do you think? I'll second the motion.
Oh, sorry.
So EMO is only between the two municipal units. And I think if we refer the concern, and the concern was awareness and getting people signed up on the City Watch program, if we convey that concern, the idea, and the little bit of information I've collected, they can decide, you know, if they need more resources, if it is a concern of both municipalities, and how they may go about raising their profile.
So Wade, basically, they want us to kind of do magnets, okay? So the motion is to refer these types of things to EMO, where they look after their, Don made the motion and Jim seconded. Yep, good, so you're clear? Everybody's good? Okay, I'll call for the question. Question's been called, all those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. Request for decision, reland, request the YARC, CAO. Go ahead.
Your Worship, we had a request back in the fall for a piece of property that the town owns that extends from Pleasant Street to the Armories. And it goes between the Fire Hall and the Yark. And the Yark, the Arts Council had requested that we transfer the property to them for the purpose of expansion. And I think they mean replacement, but in any case, they requested the property. It is recommended, and I've attached I think a fairly lengthy request for decision. I hope you've had a chance to review it. But it's my recommendation that Council deny the request for the property known as Grand Street Extension. It's further recommended that Council make clear terms under which Council is willing to support the development of a new arts and culture facility. In other words, the recommendation is that we be clear with them, and that understanding that the land impacts on a strategic decision, a strategic priority, I think, of Council, that in response to this, we should be clear.
Okay, good. So, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Cleveland.
I just wanted to speak on that a little bit. And I have investigated, I've read the blueprint with great interest. I did at the time, back in 2009, but looked over it again in the downtown, the idea of a YARC, of some kind of an arts center downtown, and it's a beautiful idea, it really is. But I have to say, in the time that this came up before, which was, 2008? Couple of years back, absolutely nothing's been done about the building of an arts center. It needs to be done. To me, I almost don't care where it goes, heaven forbid, but we need an arts center in the town of Yarmouth. If council is of the will to build one or begin process of building one now, if they build it downtown, that's wonderful and I support it. I'll spearhead the darn thing. But it has to be done. Don't reject this and forget about it. Build an arts center. That's all I have to say about it.
Good, Deputy?
Yeah, I got a question, maybe Councillor Hood or Jeff can answer it because it's just a touch before my time. The motion, the original motion, Councillor Hood, was to grant them, how did it work? Grant them the Grant Street extension, grant them the access to, okay. So that's if the arts facility was going to be built at the Parade Street location.
CAO?
So at the time, the way it originally came to us was they wanted to clean it up, and they have done that. They've cleaned up their own property, they've cleaned up the Grand Street right away, and I think they've even cleaned up property beyond that in terms of cutting alders, you know, looking after the grass and having an outside area there that is much nicer than having basically alders up to the back of the building. So the request at that time was simply to be able to use it, not to be able to use it for construction initially.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so far, I'm hearing two motions. One is, you know, with regard to making a decision whether to grant the property or not. And the recommendation is to not. And the second one is to, that council, we recommend to council to make clear, you know, some of the terms for going forward. And, you know, as Wade said, it needs to be, we need to do this. This is, it's been too long. We need an arts facility. And it's also up to the town of Yarmouth. It's really up to us for community planning and public infrastructure. And, you know, sometimes these decisions are difficult. That's what we're sitting here for, you know, to make the harder decisions. And in keeping also with what we are here for, it's to always make the decisions for the greater good of the community. And so, so for me, we need one. The greater good for the community is the downtown location and everything that comes with that. So we could certainly, I mean, depending on what council's thinking, we do need a motion to take care of that piece of land. Does anybody want to do that one? Deputy?
I'll make a motion, Your Worship, that we accept the recommendation that council deny the YARC request for the property known as the Grand Street Extension.
So moved. Second motion. Seconded. Councillor Hood, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I looked at that piece of land today, took an opportunity to drive around it, and I even went so far as to go line my car up on Brunswick and drive up to the fence at the high school just to make sure that I had it all figured out. I drove around the back of the fire hall, and I could see how it actually, it butts right up to the fire hall land, for goodness sake. And Chief's already talking about the future and what he needs there. So, but at the end of the day, I was on the council when this came before the council. And there was not a mention about building on that land, as there may be now. I think the land is something that the town should not part with, and I don't support what was really intended in 2008 by the YARC, which was to force the hands of the town to get to fulfill their dream of building on that site out there. I don't support the site. I don't support anything that assists them in getting the site, and therefore I don't support giving them this land that might assist them in getting the site. So that's the first part of what we have to deal with, and those are my comments. I know they may sound harsh, but it's how I felt about it in 2008. It's how I feel about it now.
Good? Did you just call the question? Okay. Did anybody else want to speak? Councillor Dennis?
Can I just ask a question?
Certainly.
I remember years ago when the ARC was discussed, there was talk on the street about a new fire hall, and that everyone was against it because the town wanted their land, where the ARC is today, for a new fire hall. But that's not the case, right?
Go ahead, CAO.
That's not the case, and it was never the case. At least it's never come to my office that anybody was considering fire hall at that location.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I know that's been on the street, that that's why we wanted the Art Center downtown. It was because we wanted their land to put the fire hall. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, questions been called? No, Cliff's still on, but that's okay.
Well,
That's all right. It's just a light. Questions been called. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. And the second part to this, if you want to go this far, and I would suggest we do if we want to move on this, that council make clear the terms under which we're willing to support the development of the new arts and culture facility. And I further suggest, and CAO, you can help me with this, but a letter outlining where we are, what we're proposing, together with a date by which we need a response so that we can move forward. Councillor Hood?
Your Worship, in 2009, Mayor Mooney, as he then was, addressed a letter to the ARC in relation to this issue. I wasn't on the council at that time, but I've recently become aware of that letter. I thought it was an admirable effort on the part of the council of the day, as expressed by Councillor Moovey, to move this matter forward with the downtown site. But I thought it would meet all of the needs that the ARC could need, but more importantly, it'll meet the needs of all of the citizens, broadly speaking, not only in the town. This is a facility that'll serve the residents of the western end of the province, from Digby right around to Shelburne. And it's so key to creating a rural urban center here in Yarmouth that will ensure the ongoing viability of the western region as a whole. It's not just for the town. I'm committed to that concept. I've been for a long time. I think the council, Mooney and his council at the time, were very forthcoming in their offers. So it would be my hope that we would adopt a motion, and I so move, that the YARC be informed, perhaps the mayor, the CAO, and Councillor Mooney, Deputy Mayor Mooney, could collaborate in drafting the letter, somewhat in the format of what was presented before, and put a deadline on it. There was no deadline in the last one. And it would be my intention thereafter, if the YARC does not take up the offer, to indicate in a subsequent motion that the town will look for another way to move immediately forward with a project to put a performing arts center in the downtown of Yarmouth, in the site we previously identified in back of the art gallery. It'll foster the, we have a cluster of arts-related activities. You have the museum come down the Collins P into the what would be the new facility, the art gallery, on down to the waterfront, Killam's Wharf, etc. And it all makes sense. We would have a centralized arts cluster that would be the pride of Western Nova Scotia, not just the town of Yarmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barry?
I would second the motion, but I guess my biggest concern would be the time frame. I don't want it to be our term over and we haven't made any stretch of growth. So I would say even after this letter, I think we need to get together as a team and work out particulars of where we're going in a quick formation, rather than people of the town or the community coming back and say, there's another dream that just sat on the shelf. I think it's very important that we move very, very quick on this issue.
Absolutely agree, 150%. So I would say, end of March, gives people time to get together, have their meeting, discuss which way they want to go, and get back to us by the end of March. 60 days. Does that sound okay?
I would suggest that could be an amendment to the motion that I was proposing here.
Yep, 60
Everybody
days.
good with
Linda
that?
just adds, are we okay with that? Don, you seconded it. He's going to add the 60 days in? And then we'll get on with it right away. Okay? Good, yeah. Yeah. I think the feeling is to give them time to have a meeting and talk. So 60 days is fair. Okay? So any more discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. Draft council priorities, CAO.
Your Worship, Sunday night and Monday, council and senior staff got together and went through a process of, I guess, reviewing where we are as a community, looking at all the issues that we face and could foresee, and came up with a list of priorities, strategic priorities for council. And we've also identified a number of operational priorities within our various departments. Collaboratively, I have to say I couldn't be happier about how that process went. It was very encouraging, the amount of agreement and cooperation and common spirit that there was in the room between staff and council, and certainly between councillors. So the draft priorities, strategic priorities, are before you, and suggest that you recommend them to council, and that we, I can tell you, we've already begun work on them.
Yeah, we have. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to refer strategic priorities to council. Go ahead, okay. Councillor Cleveland, second by Councillor McLeod. Any further discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. And Councillor Barry, just for your information, we already started working on these before we even passed them. How's that for timing, right? Right? Oh, Cliff's just ready to talk when he's good to go. Procurement of oil and fuel. Why did I think we looked after this before?
Just move, I think we just passed it down the,
That's what happened. Deputy, were you gonna say something? Your
Um,
light's on.
no, I just had if the CA wants to comment, I just had a couple of, one call from one of the oil supply companies in town, and they just wanted to know the process that the town purchased their fuel, and I'm just wondering, Jeff, even if we do go out for requests for proposals for oil and other things like oil or gas or whatever we use, can you still go back, even though the price, can you still go back to the provincial procurement list if you find out they're not satisfactory, or we had delivery problems with them before, or any other thing? Because I think if you went to the standard procurement list for the province of Nova Scotia, probably a pretty good chance that's the best price you're going to get anyways, but I think it might be a great time to let some local businesses have the opportunity to bid on town business.
That's a good point. Go ahead there, CAO.
So I believe if we issue a tender, we could reject all submissions, right? And you have the provincial procurement option available to you, which you know what that is, right? We know what that deal is. So if we did do an RFP and the results of our RFP did not provide us with a better option, a recommendation might come forward to reject all and to simply go through the provincial procurement. But what our practice has been to use the provincial procurement or the standing offer from the province, because they go through all the administrative work of managing that. The trade-off is if we have a local supplier who can service our needs, they're less, a smaller supplier is less likely to bid on the provincial contract, right? So they're kind of excluded. But the question becomes is if we do, and we can find this out, if we do a local tender, it will still have to go on the provincial procurement website because of the amount of money involved. If we did receive a low bid or a proposal from a local supplier, then it comes back to if your low bid was a local supplier, but yet still higher than the provincial procurement, you could accept it. But that would be a value decision that you would have to make as a council.
Is that,
I think you're not likely to get a lower price, I'm guessing.
good? Okay, so what are we asking here? So do we have to make any decisions today?
You don't have to make a decision today, but you can make a decision at any time.
Okay.
You can make a decision today, recommendation today.
We good? Yeah. Okay. Okay, correspondence for action, Yarmouth County Museum re-tax grant.
Refer to the, refer that one to the, yeah, or budget. Refer to budget?
Refer to the
okay.
grants, which
I'll make a
is where
motion
this
that-
should go anyway.
Make a motion that we refer the matter to the grant
Okay.
deliveration.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Motion carried. Linda, did they already do this? They sent in, right?
They have an application. That was
Yes.
asking the last paragraph.
Yeah,
It
because
has to
they're not,
change our
Yeah.
process back to the way it used to be.
so, okay, go ahead, because I think I know what happened.
Right, so we used to have, and we are enabled to have a bylaw that exempts not-for-profit, certain not-for-profits and charities from property tax. And so we used to have a bylaw on the books that provided specific organizations with percentages of exemption on their property taxes. And the issue, or the reason we changed to eliminate the bylaw and simply provide grants to offset those taxes to whatever degree council deems fit, is that when you do an exemption to an organization, there is no expense on their financial statements. There is no revenue indicating support from the town. And so by switching to a grants process, both the expense and the revenue show up on their financial statements as well as ours. And so council is aware, in the dollar terms, how much money we are granting to these organizations to support them in the community, and they're aware of how much support they're actually getting from the town. And that changed half a dozen years ago, and nobody is any more satisfied to receive 90% of a grant or of an exemption than they are to receive 90% of a grant. The main issue is that the organization that is written wishes for 100%. And it is an easier decision. I've seen it. It's an easier decision to sit at this table and give 100% versus 90% when you're not thinking about the real money involved. And so the change was simply to increase the level of awareness and to understand that the money relates to our capacity to provide services and grants.
So, okay, so I have a question, because I think this is partially me. I just didn't give 100%, because I'm looking at all the grants, and I'm thinking, some of these people don't even get 25% of what they're asking for, and then we are writing off the taxes to the tune of over $100,000 or whatever for some organizations. So I just simply wrote 80% or 90%, thinking, there's nothing wrong with that. I think most everybody else gave 100%, which means you're dividing the 10% I'm not giving by 7, so you're missing a couple $1,000s. But I don't want to say am I wrong, because I'm not wrong, but do I need to talk this through? Go ahead.
So because of the way I described a little earlier how we've been doing the grants to organizations, it is not a majority vote sets the amount. It is that every councillor gets to allocate the dollars as you see fit. And so if anybody, any individual councillor gives less than 100%, they'll get close, you know, they could get close to 100%, but they'll never get 100% because of just the numbers involved, right? The average. So that's in fact what may have happened.
That's what happened.
It certainly has happened more than once in the past where somebody had a different point of view than the rest of councillors, and so, but that's respected through this process. That, you know, it gives your voice individually. If you are a dissenting voice, you aren't just a nay vote that loses. You're a different opinion that affects the dollar amount, and so. You know, there's an issue there with organizations that expect, maybe desire a certain level of support, and when we can't or we don't all agree with that level, then that's the outcome.
So if you, go ahead, because I'm going to ask another question.
So if you agree with what Mr. Fraser wrote on behalf of the museum, you could be penalizing another nonprofit group, right? Nonprofit organization.
Somebody's going to get less.
Somebody's going to get less,
Yes.
right?
Yes, of course.
And I guess my question too is, you've got all the grants up here. You haven't seen it yet, but you'll see all the grants listed, and then below it you've got all the grant in lieu of taxes or something like that. Like there's two separate.
Right.
So it was almost like everybody that was in the tax portion got 100%. I'm like, what? Whoa! It didn't makes sense to me, although it did make sense. And I'm going to say this as well, and Cliff's going to chime in and agree with me. It's the Yarmouth County Museum. So if it's the Yarmouth County Museum that services everybody, we're giving out, I don't know what the number is. I would assume it's like $100,000. That's a big number.
Much less.
You know what I mean? So there's nothing coming in to counter that, to help us. So anyway, I just gave my 80. I don't feel, you know, that was my decision. Did I do it wrong?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
So I am going to echo her worship, but in this way. The default position for most politicians, including myself sitting in this chair, when they talk about regional amalgamation or unification of municipalities is, oh, well, we share services, you know, and that allows small municipalities to have 9 or 10 people sitting around the council table, or a small town like Yarmouth to have 7 of us sitting around the council. It's easy because we don't want to fire ourselves, none of us. But the truth of the matter is that it ain't fair that when we're considering grants to something like the museum here, which is largely provincially funded, but on the other hand, it isn't fair that when you talk about shared services, it isn't included in the shared services. You know, that kind of an organization isn't included in the discussion. So if they want to have truly believe in shared services, we'd all 3 councils be sitting around for most of these grants that we're dealing with here in town, because these organizations that we're doing this for are providing services in the main for people in the county and beyond.
And
so
they may give.
some of them,
Yes.
they may contribute to some of them.
Yes.
But overall, we ought to be working out a shared services agreement amongst the 3 municipalities that fairly contributes on a population-based or assessment, however you do it, basic thing. And it would be something we should be discussing. And then they can brag that they, in fact, and we can all brag that we have shared services in this area. It would be something to try to do. And if we can't do it, maybe the province could be convinced to do something legislation-wise to make it happen.
They won't. I can tell you that.
All right.
Just,
However,
yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. All right. So what are we doing with this one? We're just replacing on file.
We have referred to budget.
Okay. Referred that back. Okay. Did we vote on that? Yes, we did. Okay, Association of Psychologists, Nova Scotia, request for letter of support. I thought that wasn't just a letter of support. Okay, so this one is basically, were you going to press your button? Oh, okay. Request that the town of Yarmouth assist us within our endeavor to raise awareness of mental health issues. They're going to, the APNS is asked to install a bench in Frost Park. And they would like our support in this by holding an event to unveil the bench and announce, you know, the positive pieces of that. So I did talk to Dr. Goodwin just briefly this afternoon, and I just threw one thing out there. If council would agree, you know, we could do it. It's right out there, depending when they do it. We could have a reception out there. Of course, we would use the media to say this is what's going on, and maybe a little reception at Town Hall. Something simple, but, you know, get the word out that we support this. Okay? So the motion would be, go ahead.
Are they going to
Councillor?
take the lead on it with support from the town, and how would we work with the town under the potential activities associated with the bench finally being set up? There are about 8 items there that need to be talked about or worked on.
Oh, sorry. Do you want that? Okay.
Your worship, regretfully, I can't give you an update in terms of where this project is in terms of the bench and so on, but if you agree in principle to do something in support of the unveiling, you could make a recommendation to council, and in the interim, I'll endeavor to find out exactly where we are and provide you more detail at the council meeting for your final decision.
Okay. So a motion to support this initiative by having a reception at Town Hall or Frost Park. Okay, moved, seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. The other one, I don't know if this is part of what you're going to do, but it says donated by them but installed by the town. So should we make a motion that the town install it?
Just let me look into
Let you look at that
where we
first?
are with it.
Good, okay, thank you. All right, good. Okay, 9A, Canada 150. Just very briefly, I spoke with a lady from the IODE, Shirley, and we were discussing the 150th and some initiatives that they wanted to take, including, you know, maybe a tea or something like that, perhaps inviting the lieutenant governor down for, you know, things like that. So I just didn't know what, as a council, what steps we wanted to take. We can't just not do anything, right? It's Canada's 150th birthday, and I don't think we've done anything or discussed anything yet. So I don't know if maybe we want to get a couple community members in, sit down and talk about what we can do. It doesn't have to be anything big, but, you know, as long as, so for example, the IODE would take the lead on a tea that we could invite the lieutenant governor to, you know, do some receptions, those types of things. I don't know what Frank has planned from recreation, but we need to sit down and plan that. So what's the next step? Anybody think?
Your worship, I believe that
Whoops.
myself and Natalie have had discussions about this as well. Sorry, did I interrupt somebody? If I did, I
No, it's all right.
apologize.
It's okay. I pressed your button real.
You gotta stop. Just I have astigmatism, so when you point in a general direction, I just assume it's me.
No, you just, as soon as your light stops beeping, you're on.
Okay.
Which is why Cliff just usually keeps his on, so he doesn't have to bother with.
Anyway, at any rate, Natalie and I have
Cliff, you take a good
discussed
beating.
perhaps getting together with Frank as well and kind of figuring out what we're going to do. I have to say, I'm slightly surprised that it hasn't been touched upon yet.
Well, I want to say this to that there was an organizing committee from this entire end of the province, like Annapolis all the way through, that did approach the federal government to do some local vignettes, and that was turned down, last I heard. Actually, you were on that. Were you on that? Sort of. Yeah. It was.
There's also been some discussion about setting up an online, at the very least, events calendar of some kind that we can coordinate, so that we can have the people of the town and of the municipality can have at their fingertips exactly what's going on and when.
I agree. And I don't think we need to take the lead on everything.
Nope.
Like, let the community come up with, you know,
Absolutely.
best things. Okay, good. Councillor Dennis?
I just know so far that Communities in Bloom is giving $1,000 towards banners for the downtown with the 150th logo on it. So we're hoping that possibly the town will kick in $1,000 and maybe Public Works. Did? I know, but it's not, yes.
No, not twice. Public Works too. She's tripled it.
Well, normally it's, the town does it all, or Public Works on its own, so.
Okay. So we're just going to leave this and see what happens? Oh, yes, the motion was. Somebody did. You made it and Don seconded it. Or either vice versa. Okay. Yes, okay, just, let's make sure some fun stuff happens. Not just fireworks on Canada Day. I'm not on the recreation department, so I should just stop right now. Right?
If there's a meeting in the next week, anybody should worship within the next week,
Yeah, okay, just something, okay. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion carried. There was nothing else there, and we have an in-camera. So, motion to go in camera? Thank you. So, Kevin, do you have anything to discuss? There was nothing much happened at this meeting.